Hello, everyone who might be tuned in. Welcome to the GameDev Cafe. My name is Karina Diaz. You can find me on Twitter at CoreKarina. And I'm here hosting GameDevCafe.com's Get to Know a Game Dev interviews. So if you haven't already heard, it's something new that we're doing. We used to do a lot of interviews with game devs all the time on GameDevCafe.com. And what we found was that it's sometimes easier, especially for a busy indie dev, to find time to do a video chat rather than a written interview. So we've been doing a few of these, and they're really great ways to get to know how people got started in game development, what drove them, how did they first get introduced to video games, but also the real life pathways that you can take to find your way as a game dev, whether you wanted to make it a career or just a personal hobby. But we've been talking to some really passionate and certainly very talented game devs, including Jon, who's just joining me now from Actual Humans. Hey, Jon, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Very well. So I was just introducing sort of the people who might be tuned in and the people who might watch this video later to sort of the format that we're doing now. So the last couple interviews that we've done featured the Meatly games and their game Bendy and the Ink Machine. We also talked to Jen, the fantastic Jen from Toronto, who made the Monster Girls Gainerations dating simulator. So we've got a lot of variety. Today we're talking to Jon, like I mentioned, from Actual Humans, who probably made one of my favorite party games of late called Shoot Shoot Mega Pack. So Jon, again, thanks for joining us. I guess, before we even get started, I should ask you, what's your preferred title? Like, would you call yourself a game developer? Do you have something more niche that you focus on? What's sort of your official or unofficial role in the industry?
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. I tend to call myself a game designer and developer. I first and foremost, I view myself as a developer slash designer.
Mhm.
I do a lot of other stuff with Actual Humans. I run the entire business, but
Oh, okay.
I think
So a lot of hats.
there's a lot of hats, but it's I consider that sort of ancillary to what the actual work is for me, which is making video games.
Gotcha. And would you say that most of your day then is eaten up by the business stuff, or do you actually get to focus on game dev most of the time?
I get to focus on game dev most of the time. What I mean, I purposefully push the business stuff to a specific day or specific
Okay.
times during the day, so I am able to do that. I'm ramping up on a new project right now, and there are some other people who are working on it. So there's obviously some oversight and some direction that goes that is part of my job as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I see that as the same, right? I see that as just like high level game design as opposed to like nitty gritty like systems design or something.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, because some people feel like they get pulled a lot of different ways. So if you can obviously collaborate with others in a way that makes it feel like it's all part of the development process, that's what I think most game devs aspire to. Most people don't want to run a business. You do, however, run quite a busy and successful development studio, Actual Humans. Is there anything about I guess it could be about your game development as well, but is there anything about your role in the studio that people might not know or is sort of different from what people might expect is involved in running a game studio?
Um, I don't. I guess that depends on what. I guess that depends on who's asking the question or who is making certain assumptions. But
Fair.
like there is, I mean, there's a lot of just grind to the job, right? I work. I work from home. This is my office.
Take
And
note, working from
yeah,
home means there's still grind, right?
yeah, no, there's tons of
I
grind.
agree.
And so my hours tend to be a little strange. I mean, I try and have like a set of core hours that I work within, but sometimes that involves also working way earlier or working way later. Um, there's a strange amount of bookkeeping that I have to do,
The fun stuff.
just because I am a corporation, which is a weird thing to say. So maybe that's another another kind of strange unspoken thing about being an independent game developer. Not that I, like I said, not that I develop games independently, but I'm not owned by anyone.
Not owned, not
Um,
funded. Yeah, as you say, your own incorporation.
Yeah, so there's
Yeah.
just like a bunch of weird like accounting stuff that needs to go into it that I didn't I do not have the background in that. I've had to become like somewhat you know I don't want to say interested, but like I now have a knowledge base in like what to do with a spreadsheet full of weird money numbers.
Something you always knew you'd use somewhere and just didn't know until now where.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, those
it turns out I
teachers were
actually
right.
quite like it.
Well, that's good. I mean, the business end of game dev is something that I'm not sure a lot of people aspire to when they first get into it. I've come from a marketing background, so for me, that okay, I'm a weirdo and I happen to like that stuff. But I find that most of the creative and sort of energized talent in the game dev industry definitely doesn't want to make that their focus. And as you say, you've sort of been forced to learn it, and it can work very well to your advantage when you're trying to understand your game, but it's sort of a sidebar. When it comes to the development itself, is that something that you always wanted to do, like since you were a kid, or did you fall into it somehow from another career? How did you kind of land in game development?
Yeah, I didn't want to make video games growing up. I no, or now. No, this is totally that's a joke. I
Half
wanted
joke.
to do lots of stuff as a kid. I liked playing video games when I was a child. I also went through the pretty standard careers that I think a lot of kids go through. Very briefly wanted to be an astronaut. 'Cause space is
Oh, didn't
dope.
we all? Yeah.
Exactly. I also really wanted to, and in no way did I pursue this, but I really wanted to be a magician, like an illusionist,
Oh, cool.
uh, which I don't know. I mean, I like magic a lot. I know it's not the coolest thing, but I think magic is great.
I think it's
I
pretty
like
cool.
I like being able to be fooled and the spectacle of it. And I think about magic a lot actually when I'm like doing game design
Well, it's a
stuff
lot of
because
storytelling elements, right? Or showmanship elements.
yeah, it's a lot. It's experience design in its truest form, right? Like you're in a space. You're in a space, like not controlling, but like be presenting yourself in front of an audience, and you're guiding their attention, and that's what a lot of game design is, right? Is just like getting people to look in certain places and make connections. On the magic side, you're trying to avoid them making the connections
Right.
and trying to you slide a
Pay
hand
no
and
attention to the
yeah,
man. Yeah.
exactly. But for game design, you sort of want to flip that and get people to look in very specific places and make them understand things and teach them things without making them feel like they're being taught. Um,
Interesting. Yeah.
so yeah, I want to do that. And then I when I was in high school, I play music. I played in bands. I still play in bands, and
Oh,
I
cool.
wanted to be a musician. And I didn't really know what that meant or how to do that. So when it came time to go to university, I figured I would study film because
Nice.
all my high school jobs were working in video stores when those were still a thing. And yeah, and I was like, I really like watching movies. Maybe I'll really like making them, and I liked aspects of it. But that was when I really started thinking about video games because there was a fair amount of theory work that I had to do. And when I was thinking about like when I was learning and writing about things like audience reception theory and a lot of like film theory stuff, I was always kind of viewing it through the lens of video games because I just played a lot of video games. I also watched a lot of movies, but I was more interested in sort of the relationship between the text, like the video game or whatever it is, and the audience and what that means.
Oh, that's really
So
interesting. Huh.
yeah, it was like a weird kind of long road, and it wasn't until after I came back to Toronto from university, I didn't, I had a little bit of programming knowledge, but not a lot. Like I didn't program at all in university. The last time I had programmed was in high school, and I wasn't good at
Oh,
it.
wow. Okay.
And so I enrolled in some college classes, and I kind of like I emailed my programming teacher from high school, and she set me up with some material and stuff.
Smart.
And yeah, I after doing some college stuff for a couple months, I was fortunate enough to land an internship at like a social, like a downloadable casual game company called Social Game Universe.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And I would go to school during the day and like work at night there and ship my first game pretty early.
It's pretty hardcore. Large
Yeah,
workload, I guess, between
yeah. And I worked all the
and...
way. I worked all the way through school after, like through college stuff.
So take note, kids. That's what it takes.
Yeah,
It's not easy. Are there any maybe they weren't that influential, but were there any particular programs or schools or even professors who you felt made a big difference in sort of pushing you to continue doing that? Because I'm sure there were times that you didn't want to work so hard, but
no, I don't think so.
are you sort of a self-motivated person that way then?
I don't know that I am, but
don't want to take credit for that.
I think that part of it was out of necessity.
Okay.
I think like, I didn't know what I was going to do. I was working at like just shitty job. I'm going to swear. I did it.
Don't worry.
And I didn't know what I was doing with my life. Like I was teaching guitar lessons and I was working at a future shop, like as a seasonal worker. And there's a gap between like getting an apartment with my partner, and she was working a job and I was kind of just like, there's a lot of guilt and weird, and like I didn't really know what my life was, and I didn't want to do film stuff. I didn't even really know what that entailed right at that point. Sort of similarly to like how I felt about music stuff when I was in high school.
Right.
I kind of just made the decision that this was a thing that I was like, really, not only was I going to figure out how to do it from a craft perspective, but I was going to figure out how to actually like get a job doing it, because I didn't know how. Everything else that I tried to do, I didn't really understand what it meant, and I never felt qualified to actually work in it.
Gotcha.
And so, I don't think that the college that I went to, I don't think it was good, and I don't think it was there wasn't anyone there who really helped motivate me. But I think a community of developers and students was that was probably the most beneficial thing and the most rewarding thing. I mean, it started out, I was going to school also with two roommates who I lived with, and they like, it's just good, I think, to have a peer group around.
Absolutely.
And then over time, I got involved with the IGDA and International Game Developers Association Toronto chapter, and also the Hand-Eye Society was sort of a different thing than it is right now, which is, if you're not familiar, the Hand-Eye Society is like a cool indie video game thing here in Toronto. They used to hold bi-monthly events, and now do sort of more curation stuff, and hold very targeted specific events around the city, and they have wider reach than just within Toronto. But yeah, just meeting a lot of people through there and having conversations and sort of getting into the game jam scene, all while I was still studying, and also working.
Well, that's a good point. It's one of those rare communities where you don't have to have a degree under your belt or, sort of have this professional status to get into it. In fact, I would argue that it might be easier to get into the game development community if you are an independent who's just, as you say, kind of exploring their options and, for whatever reason, hungry for it. But there's a lot of reception and receptivity in the community to people who are like that.
Yeah, totally.
That's actually how I came across you. I think I originally met you guys at, I think it was the Level Up showcase, potentially, or some big game showcase in Toronto.
Oh, maybe. I've only been to one Level Up.
Might have been that one, but I was able to sort of play the game in a venue where there was not only a lot of game developers and people, who had gone the academic route, but independents as well, and they were being showcased on the same floor at the same time with the same level of attention. And again, from a marketing perspective, when you look at film, that's hard to achieve as an indie. So that's one of the things I love about game development, and one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, as someone who made, I think, one of the more polished games that I've ever seen in that type of venue as well. I guess I'd be interested to know, Shoot Mega Pack, is this a long time coming? Was this something short term that you guys were just able to pull off really well? How did that game kind of come to be, I guess?
Sure. Yeah, good question. it was the OMDC showcase where we met.
Ah,
where we
that's
met up.
right. Yes. OMDC is amazing at supporting a lot of entertainment, digital entertainment, but especially video games in Ontario.
Yeah, and that, I mean, that is relevant to the question you just asked. So I was working at another job. I used to work at a company called Trans Gaming, and they don't really exist anymore. I don't think they exist at all anymore. But they had a mobile studio, and I was working on iPhone games with them. I shipped a couple games with them, and then they closed down the studio, and I got moved over to their porting side.
Oh, okay.
And I was porting games. After the studio shut down, I was the studio and responsible for finishing the last game that we were working on, and then also porting games to Linux systems, specifically like set-top boxes in France. Yeah,
okay.
supporting like old GameCube games and mobile games.
Oh, cool.
These weird things for, I don't know, for the French television audience. It was a weird job.
That's unique.
So while I was working there, I was really trying to work on like a passion project or something, and I was struggling a lot with it, partially because of energy levels and also just because it's hard to work on a thing when you're also working full-time somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I went to Global Game Jam in 2014.
Oh, nice.
I had been in the industry in some form or another since like 2009 at this point. So this was, it had been about 5 years, and I was like, I just really want to make a thing. I just want to make a thing by myself that I'm proud of. And I gave myself the ultimatum at Global Game Jam that if I couldn't do something on my own that I was really, really into, just maybe stop trying, and maybe just like work jobs and do it, and it's fine. In terms of being independent, I'm fairly new to that. So at the end of the game jam, I came up with this game called Sync, where it's sort of an asteroid like your little triangles. Everyone can rotate, thrust, and shoot. The twist was, if one person thrusted, everyone thrusted. If one person shot, everybody shot.
Oh, cute. Okay.
And in the game jam version of the game, everyone was the same color. So I thought it was, a game about people trying to understand who they are, and then once you know who you are, you can like try and use that information to take out other people, and it's sort of like a reflex game. That part obviously didn't stick around, but what I learned was that the core of that mechanic was interesting and good, and people dug it. So I spent a couple of weeks polishing that up, and then I put it up for free. It's on itch. You can still get it's still up there.
Oh, nice.
The original...
We'll link to it so that people can find it.
Yeah, sure. And yeah, that was the first thing that I made on my own. I was like, cool, great, I like it. Let's do a new thing. So I tried doing a new thing. I was like planning it out and working on some prototypes, now rejuvenated from my creative malaise. While that was happening, GDC was going on. Or GDC was approaching, and I got an email from the Wild Rumpus who said, hey, someone submitted your game, Sync, for that party at the Venus Patrol Wild Rumpus party at GDC this year. Can we show your game? And I was like, yeah, of course. That's awesome.
Awesome, yeah.
So they did. They showed it. And it was a nice surprise. And I didn't get to go to GDC that year. But
did they tell you how they found the game? Like, was it just random stumbling?
Yeah, so it was just a friend of mine who had played
cool.
the game and was like, and also knew some people at the Wild Rumpus, and he was like, oh, this is a really good game. I'm going to send it to them. And it was just really, it was a cool, nice thing.
Community effect.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
So once that happened, I kind of started thinking about whether or not this game had legs, and if there was a reason to maybe invest some more time into it and to make it bigger. But instead of just making Sync Plus, right, instead of just like taking that game and building it out like a single mechanic game, really, and making it really deep, or as exploring how deep it could go,
Right.
I thought maybe it'd be interesting to slot that in to I don't know, into something larger, to make it a piece of some other puzzle that shared other
Mm-hmm.
similarities with it, and that became Shoot Shoot Make It Pack.
Oh, cool.
Um, and yeah, and so instead of just like focusing on everything moving and shooting together, or things being synchronized, I focused on player actions. So the 4 games that make up the Mega Pack each rely on player activity in order to drive the game forward. So in Zoom, this game called Zoom, for example, every time someone shoots, the walls close in and you're trying to push each other into the walls. And
Yeah.
there's one where everyone's invisible called Fade, and you can only see each other when you shoot. At the end of the day, you just get like kind of a fun party game that is about triangles and shapes and rules and friendships and
I do really like the slogan. We had it actually posted up for a little while, but I'll just go back to it. A party game about rules, friendship, and shooting. But rated for everybody.
Yeah, of course.
Just to be perfectly clear about that. Now, you mentioned it's sort of a cool party game. Is that the venue, I guess, that you pictured people really playing this in? Was it more about I guess, collaboration and collective gameplay, or is this something that you also saw people playing on their own against sort of AI competitors?
So I had always seen it as a game for people, not to get like too deep in the weeds, but like there's like the PR lines I have for marketing the game or whatever, but
Right.
at its core, like I think Shoot Shoot Make It Back is a game about the people around you who are playing it and people in a shared space. And part of that is, that largely influenced the game's design. Like I
It
like
shows, yeah.
I like the idea of people sort of coming to conclusions together in
Okay.
like a constrained space. Like, so I purposely don't give a lot of information about what a game is before people play it, and because I think a lot of the joy of doing that, and I, from everything that I've seen from showing at PAX and other events, has given me enough data to be like, yeah, this is, people seem to dig this when something happens and they don't know what's going to happen, or when they see something they don't know what it is, and then they touch a button, and they still don't really know what it is, but they slowly kind of collectively come to a conclusion so they can play this thing together. That is nice, I guess. People seem to like it, and that
surprise and delight. Yeah, there's a lot of
sure.
surprise and delight in the game, for sure.
Yeah, I was trying very desperately not to use that.
Sorry, no marketing terms, right?
I don't know why I hate that so much. I hate
like
that.
I said, I'm the marketing person, so
Yeah.
we'll put it on me. But no, that was sort of what attracted me, and I think a lot of other people who I'd never met them before at this event where I played it. But the fact that we had to talk, and we were playing against each other, but we had to talk in order to even figure out basic gameplay. That was I think probably one of my favorite things. So I wouldn't downplay that on sort of a deeper level. There's a lot of the reason that I ask is that there's a lot of multiplayer games that are designed to be party games, but there's always this sort of like bowing to the individual player, where if you don't have like this fancy AI mode, then it might not be fun for everyone. But this game, like you said, I think there's quite a lot to be added when you do play with other people. Playing by yourself, I mean, you can figure stuff out, but it's nowhere near as exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess then, in terms of creating this game, was it a difficult project to actually build? And I mean, you mentioned that you kind of learned it and did the initial version on your own, the sync version, but was building it out to this size, I guess, or breadth of project, was that a really big undertaking?
Yeah, bigger than I think I had originally anticipated. So after GDC, I just some people I knew started taking interest in the game because they saw it there, and or they had seen it back home or whatever, and we started talking. A friend of mine came up to me and was like, "Hey man, like, what do you want to do with this game?" I'm like, "I don't know, nothing or something. I guess like I'll just make a game. I'll just make a bigger version of this game and then sell it, I guess, instead of just give it away for free." And he's like, "Yeah, I think we can like, I think you can do. I think we can like get it on consoles. I think we can do all this stuff."
Awesome.
So you know, he kind of pushed me to set up a company, to set up a corporation, and I did that and I started applying for grants. I got a travel grant. That was the first thing I did, and got to go to Indiecade and show off the game a little bit there. Like, I didn't show off the game as part of Indiecade, but they have these sort of like feedback sessions where you can just, like, do your game and people talk about it and stuff. And I, you know, we also got to hang out with people I knew or meet new people there. Got to go to GDC and do all these things. And I also applied for full production for the game.
Nice.
And I received it, which is why I was at the OMDC thing. So the Ontario Media Development Corporation is a funding agency in Canada, in Ontario, and they graciously gave me a bunch of money and were like, "Here, you go make this thing that you said you can make. You said you can make it in a year," and I got my funding in like February of 2015, and I just launched the game like in April. So it took me a little bit longer than a year,
but not too bad. That's
but not too bad. So I guess
pretty normal. Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. So, you know, and I also like I'm talked to Ryan, who's a friend of mine, Ryan Roth, who did all the audio in the game. I talked to Gavin McCarthy, who's a friend of mine, and he came on and did all the art and animation
awesome.
and a lot of UI design on the game. And so, you know, this kind of like small, scrappy team got put together, like largely a part-time team. And we
this is the team that makes up actual humans, is that right?
Sort of. No.
I'm jumping ahead. Okay.
Not really. So it was so the original guy who came in and pushed me to get funding and stuff, he ended up just leaving and deciding he wanted to get out of games. So this is why I ended up taking up a lot of the business stuff. But it technically, actual humans is only me. There are contractors, and you know, I'm possibly expanding the permanent team, like the core team, at some point. But
exciting. Cool.
Yeah, it was a company that was made with the intention of like having like a small little group, but this was like very specifically just the SSMP team.
Very cool. So handpicked for the game. Gotcha.
Yeah. And because like it had gone from a game jam game to a game that now had government funding, and I was paying people, and I had all this stuff. It was a lot. It was a lot to do for a project that was originally just supposed to be like a motivational tool for myself. And you know, so to go back to your original question, which was this challenging? Yeah, and again, I just had to, like, my business acumen went from 0 to like 1. Like, it's not great, but it's higher than
but
it was.
It's there, yeah.
I had to learn things about managing people and you know, and direction. I had to learn how to manage myself, because energy and you know, combating burnout is a very, very, very real problem. And it's one that, I mean, if there was a struggle that I had throughout the project, that was it, just because I was working on this game every single day for almost 2 years. And like,
wow,
it was not good. It was not like, it got pretty dark for a little while. And
it's important to talk about. I think a lot of people, you know, they go through their technical training and they think, okay, I need to have, you know, tools X, Y, and Z, and they don't think about the personal development part of a game dev journey, which, as you say, for you involved a lot of sort of maybe business stuff that you hadn't prepared for. But on a personal level, I think everyone, especially when you're working on a project that's sort of semi-passion, semi-professional, and you have to hit that balance, it's really easy to run yourself into the ground. But it came out, and
did,
you know, in my view, I will say, as someone who followed the game along, you know, for about a year or so since I first tried it to when it was eventually out, I didn't feel like, you know, there were gross delays or anything like that. So you did a great job from a marketing perspective. The community was happy. Actually, I wanted to ask you real quickly about that. You did kind of an interesting, I don't want to say marketing stunt. That implies that I'm throwing shade. I'm not, but you did a really cool community-driven initiative to launch the game that
Right.
involved milk.
Yeah, yeah, I did.
Do you want to tell us about that, or is that?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's fine. I so uh, I was getting ready to launch the game. I decided on a launch date, and I was working very, very long hours, and trying to like. I had like this sort of not very well fleshed out calendar, just being like, okay, this is when everything needs to get done for this launch, so I don't screw it up or whatever. So the game doesn't fail horribly, um, and I don't, I haven't just like wasted a lot of time. Like, how do I do PR? What does that mean? And I don't know how to do that. That's not my background. But I know how to make jokes, and I know it's funny to me. And a thing that's hilarious to me is milk, because it's disgusting, and I don't know why anyone would drink it. So I don't really know where it came from, but at some point I was like, okay, I need a thing. I want like some sort of thing where every time someone buys a game within this time period, I'll just do something. And then eventually it got back, well, like milk's hilarious. I'll just consume some amount of milk for every copy that's sold. And then a lot of math went into like how many copies do I want to sell, or how many, like, if I get really, really lucky and I like sell a number of copies, am I gonna die? Like, am I gonna die in front of everybody, or just like throw up, or what?
It's like I could have a very good bad problem on my hands.
Yeah, it's not great. So luckily enough, the number crunching seems to have worked, and I ended up drinking like a few liters of milk and some almond milk, because there was a vegan who bought a copy and was like, I don't want any part of this. If I buy a copy though, will you drink 12 ounces of almond milk? Which I said yes to.
Did you like that any better?
No, it's horrible. It tastes like a big nut. It's not good.
A big nut. So if you want to drink a big nut, almond milk for the win.
Gross.
Oh, that's funny. And I saw the post about you drinking it, but did you actually drink it like on camera? Was this something you were, like to prove to people?
Yeah, no, that was it. I'm not gonna like I'm not gonna just like throw out promises and get people to buy copies and not drink some milk. So I had some friends I did it at a friend's house, and because he has a big projector, and so a group of people were playing the game. And I was on stream, like there was gameplay footage, but then there was also me just drinking milk, and people were asking questions, and we were just talking in a Twitch chat.
Oh, cool.
And I was under a very bright light, and I was sweating and drinking dairy. We had like a little milk cooler off to the side. It was great.
That's funny. And it's over, right? You're not still drinking milk. Okay.
No, I developed a very serious addiction. I need like a certain liter count per day, or I get the shakes.
There you go, folks. The dangers of game development PR. And it's good to know too, if you go and buy a copy of this game, say you're not torturing Jon. He's not like, forced to IV milk 24 hours a day. He can be successful and alive.
You can do that. You can be someone who gets to eat a sandwich and also not dead. If
nothing else, it's a good lesson to take away. Oh man, I mean, I think, and I hear this from a lot of game developers that the PR marketing is not our shtick, but it is impressive to me how once you are tapped into a community and once you're used to talking to that community, whether it's joking with them or chatting with them or whatever it is online, you know something about them that no one else does. And in your case, it may have just been their affinity to humor. But I think putting your personal spin and milking it, forgive the pun. But yeah, it's something that is fair to do. I guess that's sort of the message I want to throw in with my marketing perspective.
Yeah, totally.
Don't feel bad for being awesome.
No,
good.
I don't feel bad.
And no one should. And I think also when it's about a game that also is a really fun game too. Like this isn't something where people are gonna try the game and be somehow disappointed. I think I really love it. If you guys are having a party coming up soon, check out Choo Choo Mega Pack. It's like definitely one of my favorite party games out recently. I guess getting back to kind of you and away from maybe some of the work and milk related trauma that you've been through.
Yeah.
I am curious if there's any sort of, now that you've sort of decided to be a game dev and you're making it your personal pursuit, is there any retroactive advice that you might have for other people? Because obviously you tried a lot of different things and your path was not, perfectly straight or narrow, but a lot of people would look at you and say there's an example of success, funded and supported and has a game out. Is there any sort of advice that you would just give to other people who are maybe at the beginning of the road?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I'll try. It's probably going to be bad advice.
Drink
So,
milk. No, I'm kidding.
yeah, that's just, or like any beverage. Yeah, just drink a lot of liquid. Yeah. So whatever I say, take with a grain of salt, because the game industry is a very different beast now than when I got into it, and that's always the case. So,
that's fair.
I mean, my first piece of advice, I guess, is just be careful of what advice you listen to, because the world is always changing, and at some point you sort of need to be able to navigate the situation, or your own context, by yourself. But with that said, I think I think there's a lot of value that needs to be placed on patience in game development, that I don't think we necessarily do. It's a process-based industry, right? By which I mean, like, we sell products, but oh my god, I'm getting a phone call. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no worries. That's the life of a busy game dev.
Yeah. Embarrassing. Fine. But I think we focus. There's a tendency, especially with younger developers or people just like start getting into the industry, to focus on the end product, right? To focus on making a game, to focus on doing it. And that's not, like, that's definitely a goal, and those should be benchmarks that you use, but it's a long journey. Like, it's not even a marathon. It's just like an existence, right? Like it's it's taken me a long time to get here. Like, I've been in this since 2000, like 8 years now. And I just shipped my first game by myself. I've shipped other games, but every game that I've shipped before this hasn't done particularly well, right? So knowing that it's okay to take your time is important. Knowing that it's okay to fail is important, and also being really aware of where potential teachable moments are is, I think, one of the most valuable things you can have. Like, I've worked for not a lot of companies, but I've worked for game companies, and they all haven't been great jobs. They all haven't been amazing, but in one way or another. But when you're in that situation, and when you're like cutting your teeth, you can focus on that. You can focus on this isn't the job that I want. This isn't the thing that I want to be doing. Or you can kind of look for, a resource somewhere that you can tuck away in your little pocket, and then use at a later day when you maybe do get the opportunity to do something that's more in the direction that you want to be in. That isn't to say that you should always don't stick with a job that you hate for 20 years or something, but there's a cap to the amount of takeaway that you can get from any particular moment in time or experience. But it's don't think that just because you're not doing the exact thing that you set out to do at this moment in time, it means that you are not on the right path, I guess.
Right. Aren't progressing somehow.
Yeah, because everyone needs to eat, and everyone needs to, just find fulfillment in some way or another, and that's not always easy if you think that you deserve or need to be doing something else. But also if you're like, I don't think it's necessarily the best thing to rush into independent development either,
Right.
for that exact reason, because I think it's a lot hard. It's really easy to learn lessons when you're working by yourself, because you are doing a lot of stuff and you're coming to a lot of, like, you're just experiencing a lot more than you would if you're working like a single job with a single task. But it's not always, you don't always know that you're learning the right lessons, and you also don't always have that amount of, you don't have any oversight to kind of mentor you in a way that might be useful for some people. So
that's a good point. And again, coming from someone who I think a lot of people look at as strictly independent, it's nice to hear that you've had a lot of different experiences, and as you say, there's not necessarily one right or wrong way. It's different for everyone, but that's sort of sound advice. I think everyone can apply that, just in terms of taking things in stride and as a learning experience. Very cool. So I definitely feel that a lot of this, I don't know if it came to you during the process of making the game, but whatever this maturity is that you have towards game development, it's definitely a sound outlook. It feels to me like, again, you're someone who can take success in stride and who can probably pivot when it doesn't come easily. So really happy to have that advice from you, Jon. Thanks. Getting to more sort of less heavy stuff.
sure.
I mean, you mentioned that you do like to play video games. I'm curious, is there a game from your past, maybe from your childhood, that you felt was particularly formative? Maybe not in making you want to work in games, but just in making you love video games? Is there anything that sticks out?
I mean, I have my favorite games.
Okay, yeah, that's just as good.
The ones. So Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game,
Nice.
is probably one of the greatest video games
So
ever
much
made.
money spent on that game, but yeah.
Yeah, I would play it a lot in the in arcades when, again, those were a thing. And I have a copy for my NES, which I play at least once a year. And it's a fantastic, like, weird, stupid license game, but like I don't know, there's something about that, and like, it was a 2-player experience, so I would play it with my brother or just people, like kids, when I was younger, and maybe that is what led me to kind of look at games the way I do. Like, games have always been a very social, I don't know, medium for
Interesting,
me.
yeah.
Like, even if it's just a single player game, like the original Resident Evil is one of my favorite games of all time. I've played it many
So
times.
Good.
But I've never played that game by myself. I've always played that game with 1 or 2 friends
Watching, yeah.
yeah, and we'll hand off the controller and we'll get scared and we'll do all this stuff. And the GameCube remaster came out when I was in high school, and
Nice.
then we played at we just played the crap out of it, and stayed up all night and made up stupid songs, and yeah, it's a very good game. So and I had a similar experience with this music game that I really like called Guitar Man, which is like a Tecmo Koei game, from like the early 2000s, and yeah, you play like a guitar guy. You play a kid named U1, and your dog's name is Puma, and Puma turns into an amplifier, and you
cool.
turn into the Guitar Man. He tells you that you are the legendary Guitar Man, and you have to go through all these musical battles with people. And
cool.
I would play that game with. It's a very good game. And the new rhythm game Kickstarter that I don't actually know if it got funded, Project Rap Rabbit. It's the Parappa guy and one of the guys from Guitar Man.
Oh, cool. Okay, I wasn't sure. Yeah, very cool. Same guy.
So yeah, it's a really great game. I still play it. I only play it at my friend's house because he has a CRT.
Oh, okay.
And there's input delay, and I'm very high level at this game. So I've been playing it since I was like
Need that consistency.
years old. So I'm not gonna play this on my stupid LCD TV.
It just ruin it for everyone.
Yeah, it does. It's horrible.
Yeah, I hear you.
So yeah, those I think those are probably and Super Mario Strikers for the GameCube.
Oh,
I really
cool.
like the GameCube. The GameCube is, I think, one of my favorite systems of all time.
A lot of social games for the GameCube. That's how I always felt about it. It's really interesting how it kind of links
like
up to what you're making now.
And...
Yeah, and all the, obviously Bust a Move and
Yep.
Dr. Mario's and all that good stuff.
Well,
that's really interesting.
Those are my games.
Very cool. Are there any games that are coming out, or newer games that you're kind of super excited to play or try? Is there anything? I can't think of anything that's exceptionally co-op. Maybe ARMS on the Switch.
I don't know. I've been really bad about my job lately, I think, and not really paying attention to release windows and stuff. Primarily because I have such a huge backlog of games.
I was gonna say, maybe you're really good at your job and you're just staying focused on it.
Yeah. I mean, part of it, you can't make things in a vacuum. You gotta know what's going on, I think.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I mean, I end up still making the things that I want to make. I make TV games, so, which are, I don't think, the highest in demand.
Just have to get the word out. But yeah. Are there any games then, maybe not so much that you're excited for, but are any games that you've heard of that you thought sounded either just really intriguing or different? I mean, the Toronto game community is exploding with new stuff right now. But yeah, anything that you might want to tell other people to just check out or keep an eye out for?
Yeah, so one game that I this isn't from Toronto, this is from the UK.
Cool.
But it's a game called Hidden Agenda. Have you heard about this?
Ooh, no.
Okay, it's a Sony PlayLink game. Oh. It's made by the same studio that made Until Dawn.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Which another game that I played with a group of friends. My friends, who has the giant projector screen, we all sat on his couches in the dark, and then I drove and other.
Oh, cool.
Anyway, so they saw how people were playing Until Dawn, which was in that way that I just described, and they made sort of like a serial killer thriller game where you're trying to hunt down this guy called the Trapper, who he's a serial killer, but he leaves traps on people's bodies.
Oh, cool.
To kill the first responders, basically. So he's like a double serial killer. Anyway, so you play the game sort of in Jackbox style, where everyone has their phones, and instead of one person making the decision, you kind of vote on how the story goes.
Ah, cool.
And but also throughout the game, you'll get like hidden agendas, which is very much in like the style of Jackbox games, where you'll have like a certain sequence, and you might have a card that says, "Do not let this pass."
Cool.
And yeah, so and I really like deception games as well. So I'm
community coercion and
yeah, this is a game made for me. It was announced at E3. And didn't really get a lot of coverage.
Yeah, I mean, when I looked it up, I kind of vaguely recall seeing it. I think because of the PlayLink announcement, but otherwise, I mean, E3 is a tough venue to get attention.
Totally.
Interesting. So just so I understand, is the input then people's devices?
Phones. Yeah. So that's
cool.
The whole PlayLink thing is
right. It's all mobile or what? Yeah.
Mobile
Very
stuff.
Cool.
I don't know if they're also going to have controller support for it because I don't. There's I guess the hidden agenda cards wouldn't work on anything except for a phone, so it probably
they need a visual display. Yeah. Interesting. I mean, that's kind of where from what I understand, a lot of game companies are moving. They're trying to create more universal access to their games, which means getting away from consoles and fixed input controllers and all that good stuff. That's I'm really glad you brought that up, because it's probably one that would have flown under the radar if if you hadn't brought it up for me anyway. So excellent. I guess we've sort of talked all over the place. Someone's just mentioning that Project Rap Rabbit did not get funded. So sorry. So we don't know what's happening with that. I'm also a big fan of rhythm games. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there.
I guess I'm pretty sure it has publisher money, so it'll probably come out.
Yeah, with big names behind it.
Or maybe they'll just cut it because they don't think there's enough interest.
That's true. I mean, if they really want to make it, they'll find a way. Life finds a way. I guess, just to sort of wrap up, you mentioned that you're working on a bit of a new project. Is that something that you can talk about right now, or is it one of those hush hush ones?
It's kind of hush hush, not for any good reason other than I'm still kind of figuring out what it is.
Still in the cooker. Gotcha.
Yeah. It's really, there's like this weird period in game development where like you build an initial prototype of like a mechanic or something, and I built that, and I'm like, this is cool, and then you're in this limbo of just figuring out what the rest of the game is.
Right.
So I'm deep in that right now. Just no idea what this game is going to be. So yeah, it's generally not a good idea to talk about things before you can actually
Totally
form a
fair.
sentence about them.
Totally fair. And I do appreciate you in the middle of this period taking the time to come and chat with us. I think I've learned a lot about sort of where you came from and probably how Shoot Shoot Megapack came to be today. But I think you've left us with some really good advice for other people who are coming out of the industry. I guess the final question I'll have is, are there any, this could be people or it could just be an event or gathering that you've attended, but is there anything that you found particularly important or inspirational, maybe a mentor type of person who influenced you, but is there anything that you are sort of very happy was part of your growth or development as a game developer? I know, academically, you sort of weren't necessarily thrilled with the program that you were in, but along the way, you also mentioned going back to one of your teachers from high school. So I imagine there's some mentor positions that have been filled for you. Is there anyone that you'd want to shout out?
Yeah, I think an old boss of mine named Tom Francel. He actually used to be the president of Cappy.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And then he left right before Sorcery. I think Might and Magic Clash of Heroes was the last game he worked on.
Oh, cool. Okay.
With them, and he started his own company called Little Guy Games.
Yep.
Which is
very familiar.
Yeah, so I worked at Little Guy Games for a little while.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, I was the first programmer hire that they had, and Tom and I got, we're pretty close. We hang out every once in a while and we talk shop, and we don't agree on many things, but we, there's sort of he challenges me to really kind of defend my perspective in a way that I think is refreshing for this industry, and I had an experience before, and I tend not to experience now still, because people are polite,
Canadians,
and just because we have a different relationship, he's just like it's dumb garbage. What are you saying? So that's been a really important relationship for me, and I think, it's probably not the mentor relationship that I would have, I would choose for myself necessarily. I think I really mythologize the mentor mentee relationship.
Okay, yeah.
And you sort of see like this wise figure who just piecemeal spoon feeds you just little ambiguous pieces of wisdom that you need to parse and wrestle with. That's not what the relationship is. But it's been really valuable, and he took a chance on me when I was really early on in my career, and
so he's not Pai Mei, but he is like a personal push
in
the right direction. Yeah.
And I think there's I deeply respect him, and I think that he's growing to respect me, maybe.
We'll have to interview him and find out.
Yeah.
That's a really good that's a good point, though, is that some of the people who actually have an impact on you are not strictly teachers or mentors, but they're people who question you and maybe challenge you to defend yourself in some way. But that's really interesting. Awesome. Well, thanks for all your time today, Jon. I really appreciate it. As I said, I kind of learned a lot. I will absolutely link up a lot of the games that we mentioned on GameDevCafe.com, as well as, of course, a link to Shoot Shoot Megapack. You guys can check out. There's a lot of different gameplay trailers. I was kind of going through a few of them while we chatted. But honestly, the trailer itself, and sometimes trailers are not honest, but the trailer itself has some.
Oh, you cut out on me. I can't hear you anymore. Yes, there we go.
Woo! Sorry about that. We chatted so long that my headphones died. How funny is that? But no, as I was saying, we will link up to Shoot Shoot Megapack. There's some really great gameplay trailers out there, but the trailer itself for the game, which sometimes oversells the hype, does not in this case. It's really fun. The music is super energized, and like I said, if you guys are gonna pick up something for a party game, it's definitely worth checking out. In the meantime, Jon, we'll sort of keep track on your new project whenever you're able and ready to talk about it. We'd love to hear more. And yeah, I mean, we'll probably see you around at some local events, maybe Torontaru or one of the other Toronto gigs. But if you're head down, everyone, you can follow him on Twitter. We'll make sure that we put up his link. But as Jon said, he's sort of deep into the development process around a new game and mechanics. So we forgive you if you're late to reply. But yeah, thanks again for taking the time today. This was really fascinating.
No, thank you so much. I actually, this was a very good conversation. It was one of the better conversations that I've had in this sort of format. So that is
great.
Appreciated.
Oh, absolutely. It's something that we've been requested to do more often as well. So I'll just put this out there. If there's anyone watching and you guys think that there's a game dev that we should feature, or you are a game dev with some interesting perspectives or thoughts to share, just reach out at the GameDev Cafe on Twitter and we'll chat. In the meantime, this has been Jon Remedios of Actual Humans, and we've been getting to go game dev. Thanks, Jon.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, guys.